we do the development work to bring the works here, to make sure that they are in good condition, to hang them with our technicians, and then to talk to the public, to talk to you guys about what the work means and why we've done it. We also will try and talk to the press, to television, to make sure that there's lots of promotion, that people know about the exhibition, to try and bring in more of an audience. At the very beginning, you can have an idea for an exhibition. That might be a solo project, which is one artist. It might be a group exhibition, which is several different artists. It might be contemporary, so the artist is still alive, or it might be modern or historic, so the artist is dead and you have to go through the process of researching the work and finding the work. So one of the first things you have to do is think about your resources. What do you have available to you? Of course, the first one of those is your budget. How much money do you have to spend? And at a time of recession, the money isn't so big. So you won't be going to Japan to find your artist because it would be too expensive to pay for the transport of the works to come all the way across the ocean. So you might look nearer to home if you have a smaller budget. You also have to think about the kind of works that are available to you. So if it is a young contemporary artist, they might even come here to the studios at the museum and make the work, which is one option. Or you might have work that is scattered around collections all over the world, and you would have to find what's available, what can you bring to the museum. Or you might even have work that's in our own collection. The museum here owns a collection of work, so you might use that as your resources. So the first thing is, what do you have available to you, and what can you afford to bring, and what do you need? So after you've looked at that, you then try and decide what version, what story do you want to tell about this artist or about this group of artists. And that's where you start to select work. You try and find a way of either telling a chronological story. So you might want to begin at the very early work that an artist made, then look at the work that they made in the middle of their career, and then their late career, and see, can you tell a story that way? Or you might try and see what themes was the artist interested in. Were they interested in portraits? Were they interested in landscape? Were they interested in politics? Were they interested in society? And so you might try and break up an exhibition into those ideas. Going through the process then, one of the other things you have to think about is how big is the work? Some artists make giant sculptures, and in IMA we don't have giant galleries, so you just can't show that kind of work. So the pieces also have to be suitable for your space, and if the artist is alive, they will always think about that. They will always work with you in making exhibits that are suitable for the space. And then you try afterwards to think about making sure that people know about the work. So you try and organize lots of education events. So whether they be talks and lectures, or do you want to bring in school groups to see the exhibition? Do you want to bring in other curators or critics who will write about it? So you might have articles in a magazine or a newspaper or the television. And it's a process of, from start through to the finish, of trying to, first of all, begin with the idea, make the exhibition project, and then make sure that people know about it and have their questions answered. Some curators do different kinds of work. They have different kinds of ideas. So you can have a curator who will only work in contemporary work. They will only work with artists who are alive. And then you have other curators who might work more in modern work with maybe artists who are dead. And in a museum like this, there is a number of curators who work together to decide what the exhibitions are that we are going to show. And so we will try and weave together different projects so that when the visitor comes, they might see something that is historic, they might see something that is very contemporary, but that the stories you're trying to tell do make sense together. So we call these program meetings, where we sit around a table and we talk about our ideas for what should come next. And usually the boss, the director, might come along and say, I think we need to address ideas around politics because, for example, 1916 is coming up. It's in next year. And so it's obvious that a museum would want to talk about ideas around politics. So then a contemporary curator might say, I know a young artist who's making a project about that, so why don't we maybe work with them to try and see what they're saying 100 years later about that historic event. And then I might say, I also know about some modern work that happened in 1916 that is very, very sympathetic with that contemporary artist. And then another colleague might say, we have something that was made in 1916 in the collection of the museum, so let's show that as well. So you have 3 or 4 or 5 people who are coming together, sharing their ideas, sharing their knowledge, because we assume that we know lots of things and we have a different experience, but we're trying to bring different disciplines, different ideas and different strategies together at one time to make a complete picture. So I mentioned that there are different kinds of exhibitions that we might work on, from contemporary exhibitions with younger living artists, or historic exhibitions with artists who might be dead, for example, retrospectives. If you're working with a contemporary living artist, they will always have a strong idea about how much information is given to the audience about their work. So you might go into an exhibition room and there isn't even a label on the wall. And that's because the artist wants you to come in and just bring your own ideas to the work. So that if you walk in and see a completely black painting, completely minimal painting, the idea is that it might tell you some of your ideas, that it might make you think about the nighttime, darkness, what happens in the nighttime, dreams or nightmares, and that the idea is that you should bring your ideas to that work and not be told that it's about a dream or a nightmare by the label that's on the wall. And then there's a different type of exhibition. If it's a modern exhibition of work that hasn't been seen in a long time, it's important to tell the audience why it's there, what they're looking at, when it's from. So for example, in a retrospective, you want to tell the people the date it was made, where it was made, why the artist was making it. And so you'll tend to have much more information given. Each room might be explained, explaining the theme. Individual works might be explained, giving you 80 or 100 words, a very short text just about that one piece, so that you can really understand why the artist was making it and why it's being exhibited. In terms of when we're thinking about the resources that we have for an exhibition, one of the things you'll do is you'll go and see the work in a collection. The collection might be another museum. The museum might be here in Ireland. It might be nearby in the UK, or it might be quite far away. It could be in New York in America, or it could be in Tokyo in Japan. And so you have to think about the different ways that that work might get to you. So if it's a very, very big sculpture in Japan that has a very, very long way to travel, it's unlikely that you'll borrow it, because it would take such a big job to ship it, to make sure that it's safe on all of those stages and that it isn't broken when it comes to you. But if something is very small in Japan, you might be able to put it into a small box and send it by FedEx. The lender might let you do that, in which case it's quite a simple thing to do. If something is in New York, which is not so hard to get to, funnily enough, because there's a direct flight, you might go to the collector's house and measure if it's a painting. And if it's a certain size, you know that it will fit in a small crate and can go by plane. And that can be affordable. It can be possible to do. But if something is on the other coast, for example, the west coast of America in San Francisco or Los Angeles, that already is much, much more expensive to do because the plane has to fly twice as far and you just might not be able to afford to do it. So there are many things to think about. The size of the work, how fragile it is, what the lender will let you do. Will they let you put it in a FedEx box and return it to them? Or do you have to have a courier, for example? So if you borrow from the National Gallery in Washington, a person travels with the artwork to make sure that it doesn't go missing and that a forklift doesn't put a hole in the crate because it's a very precious object. And that is very expensive because you have to ship the person and the object. So these are things that you think about. What the condition of the piece is, what size is it, and what will the lender let you do?